In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson declared a war on poverty in order to make America the world's great society. Poverty had come to the forefront of domestic legislation. This new attention to poverty rose partly as a result of Michael Harrington's The Other America. In his iconoclastic analysis of post-World War II America, Harrington cited the formation of the Other America, an America forgotten by the middle class and populated by the impoverished. Harrington argued that these people were caught in a cycle of poverty. To break this, Johnson proposed his war as a series of welfare and reform programs designed to break the cycle. Although these changes were intended to root out the ills facing the American poor, they fell far short of accomplishing their goal. Policymakers and humanitarians alike have not been able to think of effective ways to solve the crisis of urban poverty due to the fact that it is so multifaceted. Unfortunately, poverty's cyclical nature remains, and the poor are estranged from mainstream American society. Within the centers of urban poverty, the poor are largely without means to break the cycle. They are without any educational resources, political representation, and economic opportunity. Because of this, they are lacking in social capital, and as a result, many are cynical and surrender to their lives as disconnected, lower-class citizens.
So when kids don't have marketable skills because perhaps the schools are failing them, which in this community all of our schools, elementary schools, are in the bottom 100 of the 2,600 schools in the state, except for one, a new one that's doing well. And the high school, the reading score at John Marshall last year was 5.5% of the juniors were reading at grade level, 3.5% in math and science. So when the kids drop out of these schools because they don't see any reason to go to school, then there's not a lot for them. So they congregate on the corners, and there is a myth that if they run drugs, that they're going to be able to make money. Or if they play basketball, and of course there are some examples of young men from neighborhoods like East Garfield Park that do make it in sports. So that's the only hope and dream. And so a lot of them are pulled into the drug trafficking culture. You almost have to join a gang to be safe in the neighborhood. So gangs and drugs then breed violence because there's war over territory. People, don't get the money straight, and people get angry. And
The war on poverty commenced with a program called Project Head Start. Head Start would provide early education for low-income families. Experts believe that early education was the cornerstone to a person's flight from poverty. Furthermore, it has been shown that effective early childhood education promotes the parents' long-term investment in their child's education. Unfortunately, as the years have progressed, efforts to provide early education have been curtailed. Schools are failing, and poor children are lacking the education of their middle-class counterparts. The high school graduation rate in urban areas is as low as 17%, meaning that urban youth come out of the American school system unprepared for the workforce and unable to compete for jobs that pay over minimum wage or minimum wage at all. As a result, the gap between the middle class and poor is further widened for ensuing generations. With an education, children have the potential to connect with America they have never seen before by allowing them to inherit social capital. Social capital is defined by French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu as the aggregate of the actual or potential resources which are linked to possession of a durable network of more or less institutionalized relationships of mutual acquaintance or recognition. In other words, one's social network. With a strong education, poor students have the opportunity to matriculate into universities with more social capital than they could dream of. This social capital, this exposure to mainstream American ways, is essential when getting a job outside of the world of poverty. Lack of political representation and lack of quality education play into the fact that economic opportunities for the urban poor are scarce. The book, Economics of Urban Problems, argues that the two main causes for economic want in urban areas are inefficiency and inequity. Enterprises within poor urban areas do not optimally use their labor or capital and unfairly distribute their economic prospects. Economic opportunity does not present itself to the undereducated, making them unable to compete in their city's job market, keeping Chicago's urban poor unable to make it out of their own dire situations. Furthermore, many big box stores such as Jewel or Walmart that would provide basic necessities and jobs refuse to open in urban areas because it would make them little or no profit, given that the concentration of poor people in the larger surrounding areas is so high. Without an education, the poor lack access to jobs and social capital that is so accessible to the middle class. Yet the poor are further frozen in poverty by their lack of political representation. In America, the poor make up the lowest voting bloc. This is the result of low participation and also their concentration in urban areas. For example, the Chicago Housing Authority built 168 high-rise buildings with approximately 19,700 apartments for families. In cities like Chicago, the number of representatives from a ward is not determined by the ward's population, but rather the ward's geographic size. As a result, a small number of representatives find themselves serving a massive impoverished population. Furthermore, since the genesis of the urban poor as we know it around the 1870s, the poor have seemingly refused to take part in the political process. It is often unacknowledged the series of obstacles that the poor face before getting to the voting booth. Some of these obstacles include a lack of transportation, but also a lack of motivation.
Why should I try? Why should I try to do what mainstream society says I should do, given the fact that mainstream society has essentially kicked me to the curb, forgotten about me, and not given me access to the tools that I need to succeed? So, yes, I believe that the spirit of many inner city adults and children is broken or fractured or shattered to the degree that their ability to aspire to higher levels of achievement is significantly impaired, thus adding to and perpetuating the cycle of poverty.
Poverty is a multifaceted beast. It has left the urban poor without the necessary education to gain job skills, widening the dichotomy between the poor and middle-class America. Without an education, poor children are also prevented from accessing social capital that more affluent children can. Likewise, the poor have been politically castrated, afflicted by depressing cynicism and apathy. These three burdens in concert have created a culture among the poor that manifests itself as frustration and anger towards the established system that continues to do little about their plight. The poor remain cynical and disillusioned in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds.